So let's just dive right into it, because in some sense, my talk's already been introduced previously. So you've already heard this term, ubiquitous computing, UbiComp. And I want to just fill in some details from what you heard earlier. So yes, this is another picture of Mark Weiser. And yes, this is the article that you've already been told you should read, or if you want to know about it. And the thing is that I was part of this team and fairly involved in this project. And I want to go into a little bit more detail by way of background, because it's not trivial. There's some interesting things that happen here. So I want to try and get two key words and concepts out about what ubiquitous computing is about. And it's about basically, how do you make things transparent? How do you make computation, or the benefits of computation, which is a much better way to say it, how do you make the benefits of computation available everywhere where it's relevant while keeping it transparent to the user? And so it's sort of like this thing where I have to cross this water from this shore to the other shore, and how do I get there in a way that's makes sense? Now, in the old days, you just swam, but there's sharks in the water, and you run the risk of getting eaten. So you introduce some technology, and so the engineering approach is you build a motorboat that pollutes and so on and so forth, and it costs a bunch of money, and you go across that way. In some sense, the purpose of ubiquitous computing in this metaphor would be that you build a bridge, hence you get around from island to island or from shore to shore exactly the same way you get around on any one of those shores. That is, you use the same skills you've used through a lifetime of living in the everyday world. You walk. Now, it's not that you can't see the bridge is there, and that's part of the aesthetics of design as well as the functionality of design, so you walk across the bridge. So it's not that you can't see the bridge. Transparency of technology is sort of like this. The dining room table, because it belongs in the dining room, is transparent to your function in the household. However, that very same dining room, if you put it in the toilet, not in the toilet, but in the bathroom, would be out of place. Likewise, if you put the toilet and removed it from the bathroom and put it into the dining room or the kitchen, that would sort of be noticed. And so it's not about it being invisible. It's just being appropriately placed in a way that integrates into the workspace. Now, what we did at Park is we started to do exactly this, was already described, and Mark's notion was that you had these three form factors that you worked with, basically boards, slates, which we call pads, and tabs. And we typically talked about in your office, in your space, you might have 1 or 2 boards, you might have 2 to 5 slates, and you might have up to 5 to multiple tens of tabs. The notion was that each of these form factors were going to become cheaper, and in some sense, you'd have as many tabs around as you might have Post-it notes. Now, you can see, actually, that's Mark at one of the first generation live boards, and you can see a slate. You'd think it was, this is a photograph is from about 1993. You can see a slate there. Everything was networked. The pads and the tabs were all wirelessly networked. And this is a close-up. That's actually my hand from. I did the industrial design on the basic specs for the tab, and Fitz Richardson Smith did the detailed design. But the thing about it is that there's a couple things about it that's interesting that relates to what I'm about to talk about. It looks like a PDA. This photograph is from 1993, so this is 3 years before the Palm Pilot. It's 1 year before the Simon, which was the world's first smartphone. It's wireless. It uses IR, which meant it knew what room it was in. And in one sense, it's a wireless PDA that you can carry around, but was networked to everything else in the building. By the way, they were absolutely useless the minute you left the building. They had no internal apps. They were actually, in the jargon of the day, it ran X clients. Or sorry, it ran X servers, because a server is a client in today's parlance. You could use, it had a resistive-film touchscreen, so you could use your finger, or you could use a stylus. But what I want you to notice about it, and this is the part that I insisted on, was notice how I'm holding it. I'm holding it in one hand, and the 3 buttons are designed around the end of the device so that the same hand that's holding it, the fingers wrap around and can be used to operate any of the buttons to get state. My background in music is no coincidence in terms of what the design came up to. It was shaped and the form was largely determined by trumpet valves. And likewise, by being able to hold it and operate the buttons by the same hand that holds it, just like a trumpet, which I used to play, you could actually have 7 buttons, but you not only can push any one of them, you can push them to 7 combinations that you get by trumpet. The most important part was you could hold it without even looking at it and work the buttons where it was necessary. And by the way, after the fact, I discovered there's a guy named Livermore who lived in New England in around 1867 who made a 6-button device that had exactly that form factor, which was the world's first portable typewriter, and he kept it in his pocket, and he would sit and take notes and scribe in exactly the same way Thad Starner and Cyborgs did. So it was all mechanical, but he was actually taking eyes-free typing, which is something none of us can do with our smartphones even today. What was important about this and why I wanted to do it that way is from the very beginning, before we built anything, was the notion that it wasn't these 3 islands, a tab, a slate, and on a board. They all had to work when they're alone, but they were designed and conceived of that they joined together in different combinations, generally based on proximity and intent. So my model, and I had a photograph actually of Queen Elizabeth rather than Queen Victoria, but this shows it up better. If you look at the English Queen, most of the formal photographs have her doing 2 things. In the non-dominant hand, holding this ball with a cross on it, which is called an orb, and the scepter in the other hand. This is the regal pose. And that was the metaphor that we would talk about, that the tab, when I was working on the live board, I would have the stylus as my scepter, and I would have the Park tab as my orb, so that when I came up and started writing, I could check my notes and have secondary material here that I could, as a secondary screen for coaching while I wrote here. And the same pen that worked on the board, I could come and actually make notes on here as well. But likewise, while holding, I could do things like, if I was in a window and anything like that, I could scroll up or scroll down or page up or page down by doing 1 or 2 keys on either side. So that the buttons, when I'm working on the live board, the buttons on the Park tab actually affected what I was doing on the board, not on the tab. So that the Park tab became a peripheral to the board. And as I walked away, it seamlessly decoupled and became an autonomous entity whose behavior changed as it became alone. And again, those are visions and things that still haven't been realized. Did we finish making all that stuff work at Park? Absolutely not. A lot of things happened. But the main thing was, from day one, that drove the physical architecture of the device. And it's still probably the only PDA that you can operate with one hand. The button functions the same hand that's holding it. Now, in terms of, to be honest, we didn't work a lot because we were just trying to make this stuff work, but in the early phases. But we got stuff working where you could work at the board, and you'd work at the tab when it's by itself. But unfortunately, God's in the details, and the most important detail is not that state or this state, not the state of coupled versus solo, but moving from one to the other, because we live in a dynamic world. And if you've read my book or heard me speak, I spent a year or 2 ranting about the following, is that just as when I see storyboards, which are screenshots or screen sketches of screens connected by arrows, I scream really loudly for the following reason. That if you don't have as much detail in your early sketches in the arrows as you do in the things that the arrows connect, you probably don't deserve a job. I'm overstating this, but let's just say you might want to rethink how you do your job. Because it's all about the transitions. And if anybody says something like the iPhone is successful because of the touch screen or the graphics or the skin, not at all. The thing that it did is it made the transitions, the flow. It's all about the flow. And those of us who think we're doing storyboards, when we put up thumbnails or screens and have arrows, have never worked in Hollywood and have never seen a storyboard. And if you study at Rochester, for example, industrial design, you will take a multi-week course in doing nothing but drawing arrows and getting the semantics of arrows right, so you can get the vocabulary of the motion captured. If you put a bunch of snapshots connected by arrows to show the sequence, and an engineer sees them, that's what they will build, and it'll go snap, snap, snap. And when you say, that's not how it's supposed to flow, it's supposed to be tumbling, it's supposed to be all these wonderful transitions, you say, you didn't specify it, it's not in the arrows, I gave you what you asked for, and if you didn't ask for it properly, guess whose problem that is? And they're right. So this comes right back to this morning, right? When Steve was talking about this, every time there was a transition, something broke. And this is true at the micro level, when you bring things really small, and at the level where people are moving from device to device or context to context. At every scale, we need to have these hierarchies of these state diagrams when I'm changing state and understand what the transitions are, and we need to be as effective as a game designer or a filmmaker in how we do those transitions. And my biggest suggestion is we start recruiting people from the video game industry into dealing with that part of the creative direction of our products. And there's two words that have to drive all of this type of how we do the transitions and how we make these graceful changes. And one, the term is seamless, and the other is graceful. And I want to talk about this in a sense, because we've all heard the word, like if you're going to have something that's going to break down for some other reason, it should have graceful degradation. So let's push on that because we're a little bit familiar with that term. When we bring things together, that's an act of aggregation, where we bring multiple devices together to work in concert. And of course, when I take them apart, that's disaggregation. And what happens and should be happening there in terms of the value proposition and whatever currency is relevant for what we're doing, I should, by aggregation, have augmentation of power, and actually a diminution of complexity, by the way. I won't get to that level of detail now. But the same thing, as I have disaggregation, I have degradation of this, whatever it was I was doing before. It's just like the Park tab could be spectacularly powerful when it's working with here, but it still is valuable here. It's just when I have the aggregation, I get more, and maybe different. But it works this way. But the key thing is, those two things are coupled, and the up and down arrow is where the transitions lie, and that's where the real design effort needs to take place. So, Derek sort of did this thing this morning and showed, look at all the stuff. How many of you have this much stuff with you? And so let's play a really quick game. What do you got with you? Who's got what? Okay, I see you have a laptop, okay? What else? Come on, set it out. We don't have time. Slate. A camera. What else? Phone. It's not a phone, it's a mobile. Anything else? Pen, paper. I see a video camera. What's wrong with you? Aren't your fingers good enough? That's my imitation of Steve Jobs. That it? Well, I got a watch. I got a wallet. MP3 player. So I didn't say Zoom. All right. Now, the snapshot here might support the notion that, so what we're talking about are these different form factors of different screen sizes and so on and so forth, and they're coming together, and all that crap is all feeding back into almost this sort of office-directed business kind of gooey blah, that's apparently wrong. And we've got to go to this new place where we have this other type of aesthetic. But Jesse actually talked about a whole other way to think about this morning, which I thought was pretty good. And, come on. And all I can tell you is that this thing isn't on your list. I actually don't have it with me right now, but that's called the WX7, and it's an electronic saxophone. I worked on it for Yamaha back in 1982, I think. Is that true? No. When it came out, 85, I think, or 86. But that doesn't look like anything you've described. In fact, I don't think anybody would call that a computer. I think it's just a musical instrument that if you haven't practiced 10 hours a day for many days, you're going to sound like a piece of crap. Especially when you have to program it. And what I am trying to say is that we don't have to wait to find examples about how digital devices are beautifully integrated into our lives. And here's the only problem nobody's mentioned is that if you want to be a really, really successful designer in our field, then prepare to be anonymous. Because the only time you should notice great design is when it's broken. It's like plumbing. If there's crap all over the floor, you notice it, but if there's not, you don't. Right? It's transparent. It's just there. Everything's where you need it. And it might be beautiful, so you might get a bit of styling stuff depth, but the primary function is it doesn't draw undue attention to itself. At a certain point, the design gets over the top and becomes ostentatious. An ego rather than great design. And I just say that there's tons of examples of things like this that already exist. And it's not like we have to move from office or business types of things. The stuff in the office belongs in the office. There's nothing wrong with an office, and it's not that then the graphical user interface on Excel is probably the most natural user interface that you can have if you're trying to do spreadsheets in an office on a desk, which, by the way, doesn't mean that that saxophone is a bad thing. That thing is crap at doing your income tax, which is why it's good. My Excel spreadsheet is great at doing spreadsheets, but it's crap at doing music, which is good. And it's this notion of strong specific tools in the form factor, the location, and then with the appropriate interface that's appropriate for the task that are dispersed throughout our environment that let things work. Here, I'm going to say this really quickly because I don't have a lot of time, but everyone in this room has probably had this conversation. I'm going to imitate my wife right now. Bill, you're always on your computer. Right? Everybody's had that, right? All right. My father and mother, in my entire time growing up, I never heard my mother say to my father, he was also named Bill, Bill, you're always on your pencil. Okay? You're going to laugh out of the other side of your face when I tell you the other half of that story. Listen, there's nothing that I do with a computer that my father didn't used to do with a pencil. Every activity that we do, more or less, right? Statistically speaking, everything we do with a computer today was done with a pencil before. But the activities were visible because of the other devices and other technologies and the other locations where the activities took place. So therefore, there were cues to let you know, I'm writing you a love letter, I'm writing the Great Canadian Novel, I'm paying our income tax, I'm actually buying you a vacation off to, Tahiti or something like that. I'm writing my parole board report, whatever. But the point is, they all had location, and they had other things around that gave cues that you weren't a monomanic thing, and the computer didn't dominate. It disappeared. The activity became transparent or visible, and the tools became transparent. That's ubiquitous computing. And if you do everything through your mobile, I'm sorry, it doesn't cut it. To show me an example that took 3 hours to create of Windows, every single function of Word. I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, think about this for a minute because critical thinking is really valuable. Yes, we can make Windows fill up your entire screen. But at the same token, I could load every free app from the App Store onto an iPhone and have the same type of overrun ridiculous thing. What good are 5,000 apps? And that's the tip of the iceberg of what's available on my iPhone. Try and work on that too. Common sense prevails, but overloading anything, take your pick, is going to make a mess. And in terms of this, just to show that I used to have hair. Can we turn the audio up, perhaps? We've hooked it up to a sound, and so we've got a high
pure sound here.
This
Pitch
is
going down as I
1982.
descend, and richness with X, and degree controlling volume. And I can finger paint.
Okay, why am I showing you that? Because I want to just again push these things about beautiful gesture and movement predate the Macintosh. That was 1982. The original multi-touch device that was first published in 1985. So we were doing multi-touch the same year Mark Zuckerberg was born, and the same year the Macintosh was born. Okay, that's how long it's been there. And it was done to make a drum, a musical instrument, not to do something in the office, not to do something productive, not to make money, but to do something. And there's a very good reason for that. No profession has a longer history of articulating powerful and creative ideas through a technological intermediary than musicians. And the aesthetic we took when we were doing this stuff, in terms of a lot of the gesture stuff, the pen stuff, and the touch stuff, in the early days, was to make musical instruments that are worthy of playing on stage as performers. That's the aesthetic we brought. And it's only recently that at the mass-produced level, we've been able to get the means to deliver that in the broader space. But I have to tell you, it was that and this work that got Alan Kay, when he visited and saw it, that got me to go to Park the next week. Now, as we come along through this path, we start to realize that things are snowballing out. We have all of these devices. We have social networking. We have the internet just going crazy. And more and more and more and more and more, as you so correctly said. Now, I'm happy to prune some of this stuff off, but there's social networks of people. And we've got the internet, which is sort of like whatever. But for me, I want to talk about the social network of devices. Not because I'm a hardware person, but because of what I already said with that simple example of the whiteboard and my tab, where they start to work together in concert when they become a social network, a nice pairing, but where they can also come off and be individuals for a while. And if you get nothing else out of what I want to say, it's this. I believe that going forward, the only way we're going to avoid our lives being populated with a whole bunch of garbage gadgets. Just think of the remote controls that are on your living room coffee table, any one of which anybody knows how to use, but together, nobody in your family knows how to turn on the TV after you've watched a DVD. It's going to get way worse. And if you tell me you're going to have a better living room remote control, universal remote control, take that on the road when I'll give you another example, and another. And then we'll have so many universal remote controls in so many locations, the complexity just moves there. You fix it here, it goes there. Take the two buttons off the mouse, get a one-button mouse, you transfer the complexity. That's always been the case. Again, you've already heard that. But the question is, by the right combinations of simple devices where they augment each other, we reduce complexity. It's one of the few cases where we have the opportunity, if we do our job right, where more is less. More of the right devices gives us less complexity, and in fact, more of the right devices gives us more squared, or to the nth power, of value. And that's what this network brings. Now, we're in this sort of network and mesh of things, and there's a lot of ways we have to think about it. And it seems to me that in this web and so on and so forth, we have to ask one fundamental question, and that question is, who's the spider? And even there, this sounds like a stupid question, maybe, and it's maybe just a way because I like getting my photographs and my slides and then figuring out a way I can rationalize it. But it's, in this case, is the cloud the spider? And then we all hang off the cloud? And so we're the tentacles at the very end, hang on to the tree for dear life so we don't spring in the Spider-Man fashion? Or is it you and me, the people that are at the center of this? And I'd argue that the way I think about these things is that I'm the center of my own web, and my web is interlinked with your web, and so our networks, our webs, can link, and the social networking isn't a link from me to you. It's my web to yours, some of which may overlap. But my immediate web is made up of the devices that I personally own, and then how they interact with the things that might be embedded in the environment that I'm moving through in the public space, and to the things of people that are in my close network, how they might be able to have that kind of relationship too. And the key thing about this is, forget the technical part, what are the social mores of approach and departure and connection and I'm going to do this all the time, but this is, you're Irish, so you can take this. Okay, right. I'm going to give my talk just like this, right? Now, this is kind of strange, right? And he said nasty things about Microsoft, so I didn't put my stylus in his ear. Now, the deal is this. You're laughing because it's the only thing to do other than be aghast, because it's so inappropriate. But watch this. I'm going to do something equally terrible. I've got my cell phone. I just put it against her laptop. So what? Who gives a crap? Who cares? Nobody knows. Electronically, in that web, they don't know each other exist. If I put it beside my laptop, it has no idea it exists. They're both running Windows. What's with that? Proximity, approach, departure. And by the way, as I got a certain distance away from you, and I bet if we both wrote down, we could predict exactly how far I got away from you when you started to feel comfortable again, right? We're guys, what can I say? But this is really important. And I'd argue, if you want to think about, when you talk about ubiquitous computing, the reason I'm not picking on anybody, but when I put the saxophone up and the drum and this sort of stuff, as well as the computer screens, or phone screens, or whatever they are, that the way to calibrate is this. Pretend they're browsers, okay? In the future, the diversity of web browsers is going to match the current diversity of ink browsers. And ink browsers are also known as paper. And if you want to do your ethnography study, then get the people in your team or your clients or yourselves, you can make money doing this with your clients, is that they have to do a 24-hour diary study where they take an inventory of every encounter they have with paper over the course of 24 hours, where they not only notate what it was, where it is, how big it was, what's the message, how long should it be there, what did it cost, and so on and so forth. Because every one of those is a potential case where our interactive digital things are going to have a place going forward. From money, to newspapers, to posters, to billboards, to labels. I literally, yesterday, I saw here in Lisbon a company that's making things that are electronic displays that are at a price point now where there can be labels on products like Coca-Cola bottles, at that level of mass manufacturing. So this is not exaggerated. I'm just saying this is happening where appropriate. The technology is no longer the inhibitor. And this is the most important thing that we all should recognize. The reason things were difficult before, in the era that ended about 5 years ago, was because the miracle was anything we built actually worked and that it could be sold. I don't mean we, Microsoft, I mean we as an industry. It was a miracle that we could actually get this stuff working sufficiently reliable that we could get money out of cash machines and not feel nervous and so on and so forth, and send money with PayPal and so on and so forth. Those days are gone. And the only question, that if you can't make it work, you shouldn't be in business. Now that we can make anything work, the ultimate question is, what's worth making work? How should it work? Now that we can do anything, what should we do? And that's what this is about. And my view is, my focus these days is not about any single device. If you can't make something as good as anything Apple makes or anything as good as the Kinect, you shouldn't be in business. I take that for granted, just like I take for granted when I drive over a bridge that it doesn't fall down and it looks really good. Right? It's just engineering, it's design. That's professional, that's just doing your job. The next job is make the stuff work together. So I want to come back to the paper thing, though, just to make my point, because every once in a while, a point needs to be emphasized. Redundancy is a bad thing. We think about e-paper and e-books and e-readers, but you hardly ever think about a newsprint magazine straight off the stand. This is the 75th anniversary issue of Esquire magazine from October 2008. It has an e-ink, exactly the same technology that's in your Kindle. Not only in the front cover, but on the inside cover, there's an advertisement that is quasi-animated, with the battery and everything in the cover for the same price as the regular magazine. That thing blew me away when I saw it, because I'm supposed to know about this stuff. I'm supposed to be some kind of visionary, and it caught me completely with my pants down. I had no idea. And then, a year later, almost exactly, came this. This is an issue that was on the newsstands in New York City and in Hollywood of Entertainment Weekly, and on it, there is a 2-inch LCD television set in the print edition for the same price. And it has 6 hours of replay on the battery. And it had 40 minutes of video inside it. It had trailers for every single show that was going to be launched in the fall season for CBS. It was sponsored by Pepsi-Cola. And these buttons along the side here are the channel changers. You could just push and select which show you wanted to look at. And if that doesn't just give your entire conceptual framework, if you aren't familiar with this, a total refresh and rewrite in terms of how broad should we be thinking. We talk about e-readers and e-books and e-publishing. I don't know what else it takes, because this floors me. I chased both those down. I have working versions of both of them because I just can't believe it, and I want to show them people all the time whenever I can. And that speaks to what I said about ink browsers. If we can do that, economically in a business, what else can we do? Well, this is what else we can do. This is what they used to do in London to change the posters. I can't remember when Sid Kai was in Vienna, but I think it was at least 6 years ago. But already 6 years ago in Vienna, they had projectors mounted above the subways, and they replaced the paper with projected video. And by the way, it was the worst crap content I've ever seen in my life. It was like the QVC shopping channel. It was like these people had no idea about media. It's got a projector, it's video, so it must be television, right? And they had no idea. And there's no way to interact with it. That's the other part. But that's then. This is now. Think about it. Subways are the most perfect place to have projection because there's no daylight. You've got a controlled lighting environment. You don't get killed or electrocuted when you're on the tracks with your ladders. And the stuff can be changed by time of day and so on and so forth. And you could, if things were done right, use your mobile to actually take things from that. But we're going to get ahead of myself. We'll come back to that. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. Every place you see one of these posters, these advertisements on a bus shelter that are made out of film with backlit with lights. That is going to be a thin film polymer display that's on the net. Whether it's wireless or tethered, who cares? It's got processing power, it's on the network, it's there. And it can be changed by time of day and so on and so forth, and it can do all kinds of other things. But here's the nature of the types of how our transactions can start to change, and there's very subtle things that come out of this. So you come up with your phone, because I'm a stranger in town, and I come up and I pull out my phone, and by pointing my phone at the device. By the way, all I'm asking here is that my mobile phone be able to do, my so-called smartphone, what a term. If you call these things smart, I think we should all stop using that term. They're smarter phones in the sense they're smarter than the phones we had before. But if you take this as smart, then I worry about the people you hire because you probably think they're smart too. Would you hire your phone if it was a UX designer given its level of intelligence? Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right? Now, if it could do what my Palm Pilot could do in 1996, that is, without any handshaking, just point it at your Palm Pilot, push a button, and pass you my business card or an address or whatever I wanted, which I cannot do. Bluetooth doesn't let you do that because when I pointed at you, it's going to the person in the room on the other side of that wall. We can't do that yet. This isn't just about software. It's the whole deal. It's the entire ecosystem, just like those 3 buttons like a trumpet on the PDA of the Park tab. But watch what happens. I do it, bingo, up pops a map, because that's what I asked for. Why would I use the dinky screen on my smartphone when I've got that honking big display there that Nike's willing to loan me? And now I'll just use the touchpad here the same way I use the touchpad on my laptop to control whatever's up there on the big screen. By the way, it doesn't have to be a map. You and I could be playing video games while we're waiting for the bus. Or whatever's appropriate. But the point is, notice 2 or 3 things. This simple coupling, the aggregation of these 2 things, reduces complexity for people like me that are 63. I just became a grandfather, and I can't read as well as I used to, so I appreciate the big screen. Thank you very much. And I want to be able to get the information and take advantage of it. And I don't want to be searching around for hotspots. But just a minute. All of my experience with ads online have been banner ads and pop-up ads that are absolutely pissing me off. They get in my way, and despite the fact I know intellectually that they're paying for my free stuff, I still resent them. Because I want it free, and I don't want to be charged for it in any way at all, in inconvenience in that. Nothing's free, by the way. We'll talk about the valuation of Facebook and what they're actually buying on the boat tonight. But anyhow, the point here, notice what has happened. And by the way, I love advertising because it keeps us going. But here's the point. By this simple thing I just did, seemingly just coupling up 2 devices, heterogeneous devices, almost like the live board, right? The big display with the palm, a handheld, exactly the same with before, but in a different context, therefore a different product. I've completely reversed or transformed the relationship between me and the advertisement and the advertiser. I have always had an annoying pop-up ad on my application. I have a welcome pop-up application on the ad. And if I know that Nike offers that to me, I'm going to search it out every place. And furthermore, pop-up ads you get rid of, they're not persistent, and they're in your peripheral vision, and we know that the foveal cone of vision is about 14 degrees, and you're up close, you're not going to see them anyhow. I've put a Nike swoosh watermark right in the foveal cone of vision in the center of the app in such a way that it does not intrude with my ability to use the map or the application, but I still get the imprint of the brand. See, I'm not disrespecting the ads. I want the ads to work for everybody, including me. And it's this notion of coupling that opens up completely different opportunities, because now, is that a phone app or is it an outdoor advertising app? Or is it a service kiosk app? And the answer is yes to all of the above. But the relationships among the people in the ecosystem that play in this have to change dramatically to make this stuff actually work. And by the way, just to give you an example that I'm not smoking crack or anything like that, in Yahoo's already implemented touchscreens of that size in bus shelters in Washington, D.C. and in the Bay Area to do field trials. So this is not that far away. Gibson was right. The future's already here. It's just not uniformly distributed. If you read my essays about the long nose, you'll understand that these things have been around for decades. So, some examples, just as a wrap up. We have to become collectors. We have to start to actually watch around, and just like people don't notice things like a saxophone because it's a saxophone, not a computer. It's a camera, not a computer. A camera's just a computer with light in and pixels out. Useless for income tax. Your MP3 player, it's a computer, but nobody calls it that way. Your Nintendo DS can absolutely, my kids are all sitting around in the same room playing like Mario Kart Party. What's really interesting too, this is a little bit more heterogeneous as opposed to a homogeneous network. Whereas the electronic cart Scrabble, you can actually use that for playing Scrabble. One of the modes that comes is that you use your iPhone or your iPod Touch for the tiles and an iPad for the game, and you can sit and mimic the round table social thing. And it changes completely the social nature of playing electronic games. Nest Learning has a thermostat. Get this, a normal digital thermostat costs about $25 to $30. This thing costs $250, and they can't make them fast enough because you can use your iPhone or whatever, your mobile, to control the heat and set the heat and turn it down. You're driving home from a 3-week vacation. In the winter, you can turn the heat up so the house is warm. You don't have to do any of this fancy programming. Now, all of the things around this, remember I said it's about the transitions. Transitions are the transactions, are the key part of the transactions. And if we step outside of our own small world, there's some theory and knowledge that we can apply really to how we think about these things, how we evaluate, because the term keeps coming up, and I think appropriately so. How do you measure? How do you determine for yourself, much less your clients or your boss or anyone else, or even sell it to your customers, why this is better and why you would do this instead of that? And the answer is taken from this guy, Ronald Coase. 1991, he won the Nobel Prize. And he won the Nobel Prize for this theory of how firms interplayed amongst themselves according to the cost of doing business transactions. And this notion of transaction cost should be in every single one of our vocabulary. It should dominate all of our conversations if we care about transitions and transactions. And say, what is the cost? But that's not a good enough question. You have to say, what are the currencies that are relevant in this context according to which we determine, much less measure, the cost? What should it cost and what's determined? And what's the exchange rate amongst these other currencies? Otherwise, we cannot do an appropriate cost-benefit analysis. That notion of different currencies, exchange rates among them, and then cost-benefit analysis on the cost of the transition. It could be learning. How long does it take to learn? What's the risk of failure? What's the enjoyment factor? You know, what kind of acuity does it take, and so on and so forth. What's the comfort level? How subtle can it be, or how loud is it? All those things are important to think about it, but it really plays into this. And I want to give you some examples. All through, I've tried to throw examples that you can buy today to show that the future really is there. We don't have to start from a standing start. But one of the arguments I think that everybody gets over and over and over again is that, why should we do that? You can already do that. Why would I pay for that? Why would you add that to my product? Look, you can always do it. When we were doing Maya, which is this 3 package, every time I said, here, we could really streamline the interface by making it really simple. This is what people do. They're not doing this and this and that. They just want to do that. They said, well, you can already do that. Look, and they gave me this circuitous thing that I'd fallen asleep by the time they finished telling me how to get there from here. I want to just propose. Pretend I have a consumer electronics product that's in everybody's home. And that consumer electronics product works perfectly well. People love it. It works. And they spend hours and hours and hours a day with that consumer electronics product. Let's pretend we call it television. And let's pretend I am some idiot at Sylvania decides I'm going to make the customer pay for an entirely second set of controls. I'm going to get a second volume control, a second channel changer, and a second on-off switch. And I'm going to make them pay for it. Now, by the same logic that every one of you have had by your management at least once tell you can already do that, why would we add that? I'm going to say, I'm going to do it anyhow. We should do it. I'd love to meet the person who made this argument and actually got this to happen. Because what they did for that television is they added the remote control. It's absolutely useless. It brings zero new functionality from any engineering perspective. But the one thing it changed was the transaction cost. And think about this for a minute. When we were in that period of transition, if I went to a hotel that did not have remote controls in the hotel rooms, I never went back to that hotel room again. In the same way today, if you charge for Wi-Fi, I don't go back to your hotel again. It saved you getting up out of your seat. Was it good for the health of North Americans or of people? No. But it's sold, so it's good for the health of the investors. We got to deal with those things. And by the way, this is the first one. This is one of the first ones. They own this, and they were called clickers because the original ones worked with acoustic sounds. When you push the buttons down, they made a distinct sound. Each button made a different sound, and it was a clicking sound, and there was a microphone that could sense those, and that's how it was done. It wasn't IR, and it wasn't Bluetooth, but those were the first wireless remote controls. But that's why they're called clickers. Now, Peter today just said some really interesting stuff, and he talked about the right multis, and he talked about taxonomies, and multi-channel, multimodal, and so on and so forth. And again, that's good because I don't have to talk about it more. I just want to make a couple things to say, here's here's another distinction to help a meaningful dimension of differentiation that helps us carve up the space in terms of a meaningful taxonomy that helps us reduce and deliver. Here's connect. This is connect being used to control the TV as a foreground activity, okay? This is my foreground intentional action. My job now, my purpose is to play a game. Therefore, everything else get out of my face. This is the interface, right? But here's the earlier version of Connect. You may not have known this, but Connect's been shipping for decades. And you didn't even notice, perhaps. And here's an example. This is at Staples. What other than an early version of Connect is the optical sensor above the door at the business supply center there that opens the door for you? And what other is it than a video game where the game opens the door for you as you go out with the buggy? Now this is really important. That is a foreground task. My task is to play the game. My foreground task here, again, because right back to what you heard earlier today, is to get out of the store and get what I bought into the car to go home. And because I got this buggy in front of me, I can't reach the door to open it. And therefore, it just opens for me by proximity sensing. That's Connect. It's a trivial gesture, but here's the thing. It is a computer, but unlike in the Sega way, having billions and billions and billions of switches, it has one switch, but that one switch is smarter than any of your computers or mine for this purpose, because it senses activities in the environment the same way you sensed me and acts on accordingly. But the intelligence is in the location and placement of that switch. Notice it's not on the bank vault. And what it does is it offloads complexity. Adding technology reduces the interference, the task interference that would otherwise exist by opening the door, and it comes through. It has value. And to close the loop, by the way, and this is why this type of analytical thinking really helps us do a better job, is we've only done half the job. Because I live in Canada. You think it's horrible weather in Ireland. You should live where I am when in the springtime when you've got a foot of sloppy, wet snow, and you've got paper bags of groceries, and you come up to the back of your car, your keys are in your pocket or your purse, and you've got to put the bags down on the wet snow to open up the trunk of the car, and then in order to put these things in. Now, just let me do a little arithmetic here. My car, whose keys are in my pocket, that even lights up when I walk past it at nighttime because it's got keyless entry, so-called, I have to put my bags down, get them soaking wet, and get my keys out. The supermarket, which I don't even own, I don't even know who owns it, opens the door for me. Why does my own $30,000 car treat me worse than the store? And why isn't Connect of some version in the back of the car? It recognizes me by my key fob. It knows I'm there. It can see with the 3D imaging that I've got bags in my hand. At least in the supermarket, if I have to put my bags down, the floor's dry. And away we go. But you realize it's all about offloading complexity and saying, what's the foreground task? What's your principal task? Again, you've heard this already this afternoon. I don't have to repeat it. Except my grandmother was Irish. She's a Doyle. And so we go. But here's another better example. I'll wrap up with this, because this is really important. Here's my car. This really is my car. Mine's black, but it's a Ford Escape. I gave my BMW, which is about 6 years old, to my kid as a graduation present so that he could pay the service bills instead of me. He works for a bank. He's okay. He can afford it. And I bought it because it has Sync in it, which is the software that synchronizes. Now, here's my phone. Now, what's really interesting to me, and this is the most delightful thing I experience with computing devices that makes me, whenever I feel upset or frustrated with what I see in the software industry, this puts a smile on my face. Think about this for a minute. My phone, it works okay. I get in my car, I throw it in the passenger seat. I drive away. I turn on the stereo, I'm listening to music, everything's good, and the phone rings. My hands don't leave the steering wheel. My eyes don't leave the thing. I go bang, hello, I have a conversation. All right. So you sort of say, well, so what? Well, because that was magic. Think about this for a minute. Who knows what a mobile phone is? Hands, please. Chickens. Come on, come on, come on. Be brave, be brave. Be honest. All right. You with the glasses back there, you put up your hands. Where is the mobile phone in that transaction I just described? On the car seat. How many people agree with him, the naive young man? All right, let me just do a little bit of electron engineering. I am a scientist. Please don't try this at home. However, the only thing that's being used of that phone is the SIM chip, the Bluetooth transceiver, the battery, and a tiny, tiny bit of logic. Everything else is in the car. The speech recognition, in the car. The address book, in the car. The speaker, in the car. It even turns down the, instead of opening the door, it turns down the stereo so I can hear the call. And the microphone, in the car. The correct answer, where is it? I think the best answer is yes. And the next best answer, or perhaps even a better answer, says, who cares? Are you having a good conversation? No. Are you having an appropriate conversation? Because notice, if that magic didn't happen, I should lose my driver's license. Oh, because this brings another thing. Ask anybody. Talk to somebody from Microsoft if you really want to if you really want to get them going. Say, so what's this interface? What's the interaction language for Windows Phone 7? By the way, you can do the same thing with people from Apple, but they just don't have a name. Actually, they do for the interface style on the iPhone. But I just don't know what it is because I don't work for Apple. But I'm kidding. Here's the deal. No, I'm not kidding about not working for Apple. I'm just kidding. Here's the deal. If somebody says Metro, just say, I beg your pardon? I mean, when I'm driving my car and I'm using sync and with a speech that I'm using Metro, well, guess what? You're not. And this is the re-education all of us have to have. No, it's Metro when Metro is appropriate. It's not Metro when Metro's inappropriate, like when you're driving a car. So that if after I've hung up the phone and I have a text, I get a voice. Hey, your wife just, Liz just texted you. Do you want to hear it? Yes, I'll read it to you. Bang. She reads it to me. It's a woman who's in my car, the computer. And I don't know why, but it's okay. My wife approves. And when she's speaking to me, after she's finished, she says, would you like to reply? Yes. Okay, start dictating. I dictate. Would you like me to read back what I think you said? Yes. I have to say, honestly, it's never made a mistake. So, yes, send it. Then, here's the best part. My son phones. I park the car, I'm still in the conversation. I pick up the phone off the seat, after I've turned the key off, and I just go like this and walk down the street. And 90% of the technology at the local end supporting my call just changed completely, seamlessly, and transparently. As I disaggregated, so I had disaggregation. I don't have all the fancy speech stuff anymore, and I'm back to Metro. But because everything changed, 90% of the technology changed, I had zero change in the continuity of the conversation. And so when anybody says your user interface has to be consistent, just say, give them this example, right? I tell these stories because stories are the most original form of viral marketing. Make them your own. Pretend you invented it. Place it in your own context. Personalize it, but have these in your hip pocket so you can say, no, consistency, unless you can guarantee there's consistency in context, location, and people and task in when people use this application or this device, then forget this notion of consistency other than consistency in quality of experience and consistency in value. Those are the only consistencies that matter because they're the ones expressed in human terms. That's the style sheet we should write first. All right, we're wrapping up. I love this, right? You can't depend on your eyes when your imagination's out of focus. These things we've been doing today, just go on the ship tonight, the reason to get out of town, get out of your computer, is to help our imagination grow. Proust said, The only true voyage of discovery is not to go to different places, but to see through different eyes. And our job is to be the best damn, what do you call them? Not obstetricians. What's an eye doctor, anyhow? Optometrists in the world. And with that, I'm going to stop and say thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions.